Good evening, fellow Toastmasters. My name is Sharita. I am the VPE for Silvertongue Toastmasters Club and District 38 D40 Area Director. On behalf of the Silvertongues Toastmasters Club, I am honored to welcome you to our three-part educational evaluation series, The Gift of an Evaluation. At this time, I would like to introduce our presenter this evening, who is Rhonda Young. Rhonda is an IT consultant for a digital transformation company, focusing on clients undergoing a merger or acquisition. She holds an MBA in strategic management and a BBA in accounting, both from Temple University, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Rhonda is a distinguished Toastmaster and is pursuing another DTM award under the Pathways program. She is the immediate past District 38 Director. Rhonda has been a Toastmasters Gavel Club mentor at a New Jersey Juvenile Detention Center, mentor for the National Black MBA Association, Philadelphia chapter, Leaders of Tomorrow program, and mentor to new Toastmasters clubs. Rhonda is passionate about leading, mentoring, and enabling others' success. Ladies and gentlemen, our presenter this evening, Rhonda Young.
Thank you, Sharita. And good evening, everyone. I've been waiting with bated breath all day for this moment in time, just to see your faces and be amongst friendlies. It's been a difficult day today, but nevertheless, we're here to talk about the gift of an evaluation. I will pull up my slides and get us started. So as Sharita mentioned, this is part 2 of a 3-part series on the gift of an evaluation. I'd like to thank Silvertongues Toastmasters Club for sponsoring this event. If you get anything out of it, you owe it to them. For tonight, we will focus on session 2, approaches to evaluation. And my disclaimer is this is a perspective. And there's probably other approaches to evaluating. And I look forward to spirited dialogue, meaning two-way, between all of us or among all of us, so that we can maximize our learning today. I look forward to getting things out of it from you all as much as sharing information with you. Specifically for tonight, our agenda will have a very brief recap of session 1. So please, as my Catholic school teachers used to say, put on your thinking caps. And if we can remember to last week, we'll have a little bit of discussion about what you got out of the session 1 for those that were here. We'll talk about approaches to evaluations, don'ts and do's. I may have that in reverse order in my slides, but nevertheless, we'll explore some of the things that we should do and things that we should not do in an evaluation. And finally, we'll have a learning experience. We'll hear a model speaker or view a model speaker. We have a video today. We don't have a live person. And then we will explore different approaches to evaluating the model speaker. So session 1 recap. Let's see if anyone remembers. We talked about the benefits of an evaluation, and please just come off mute and chime in and give us a tidbit of what you remember about the benefits of an evaluation. Don't make me work for your comments tonight, please.
I'll go.
Thanks,
It's
Jill.
3 parts. It benefits the speaker because they're learning what they do well and what they have opportunity to improve. It benefits the evaluator because it gives them a chance to work on their speeches as well, because when they deliver the evaluation, they're delivering a speech, and it teaches them what to listen for too, so they're more attuned. And it also benefits the audience because they get the benefit of watching both of those things. So they can learn from, proxy, not having to actually do it, but just learning from observation.
Right. Thank you, Jill. Jill was listening. Thank you so much. The next, we cover verbal and nonverbal communication. And this is when we began to look at the anatomy of a speech. Before we can evaluate, we know that we have to understand the components of a speech, some of the elements that make speeches more effective than others. So one thing we talked about, or the two-parter that we talked about, was the verbal and nonverbal. So does anyone want to expand on what it means to be have verbal communication versus nonverbal communication?
With
Yeah, oh, go ahead, Joyce.
okay. Well, the non-verbal would be your body language and your vocal well, it's vocal, but vocal variety, your gestures, things like that would be, as opposed to the content, the organization of the speech having a opening, a body, and conclusion.
Yep, you're getting a little ahead of us, but that suffices. That does work. John, you were going to chime in?
Yeah, on that nonverbal, it's use of the speaking area, eye contact. There's a bunch of stuff in there. Certainly, tone of voice, pace. How much vocal variety there is. Perhaps impersonations or that kind of thing. So you can really go all over the acre. And my recollection is the verbal and the nonverbal, or I'm sorry, verbal versus nonverbal is probably 65-70% of what we're saying is the, and maybe even a higher percentage is the nonverbal.
Yeah, it depends on who you talk to. There's been studies done about the balance between nonverbal and verbal, and sometimes how we say things, our body language, facial gestures and expressions, proximity to people that you're speaking to, sometimes that speaks louder than the actual words that you use. So just be mindful of that. So this is getting into Joyce. Joyce is my good straight person today, giving us good transitions and segues to the next topic or recap item, which was speech organization, title, and purpose. Does anyone have anything memorable to say about any of those three elements?
Well, your title can be your hook to get people engaged if you have an interesting title that piques their interest.
Yep. Thank you, Joyce. That was the purpose of mentioning title before. Exactly right. Anyone else? So as Joyce mentioned, speech organization is where there's an opening, a definite opening, body, conclusion. We talked about the opening being very dynamic, and that's another hook to bait your audience so that they are following along, they're engaged and in tune to your presentation. The conclusion, we never want to hear speakers just say, that's all I got. And I've heard that a million times, or that's it. You want people to end gracefully and end definitively. How many of you have heard numerous closings in a speech? I know I have, where the person sounds like they're concluding, they go on and ramble on for a little bit longer, then they conclude again, and they may even do it a third time. So making sure that we're giving feedback and we're looking for that definitive conclusion. And then to understand the purpose of the speech. Is it to inform, entertain? Is it to influence you, compel you to think of or adopt a new way of thinking? Is it a sales pitch? There's all different types of purposes, advocacy, humor, etc. John, did you have something to
Well,
chime in on?
I was just gonna say that one of the things that we touched on was that what seems to be most powerful is if you have an introduction that introduces where you're gonna go with the speech, then you go there, and then the conclusion, it's best if we can do it so it ties back to the opening. That gives the listening a full package, if you will, whole, it's wrapped up with a bow on it.
Exactly. We talked about using references. So if you're quoting material, you're giving statistics, you build credibility and demonstrate research and preparedness when you are able to actually cite the reference. If you're sharing a book that inspired you, please give title and author so that other people may be able to look the book up. Word choice, grammatical devices, and I have something covering my screen, sorry. Vocal variety, we talked about those as also being enhancements for your presentation. They add dimension and color and interest and helps paint that mental picture for people who are your audience. We're voyeurs into your life, so we have to rely on your narration and helping us to imagine ourselves in your position in a story or in an experience. Visual aids and humor. So these are some of the things we've talked about as being elements of effective speeches so that you as an evaluator are aware and you're able to either point out exceptional uses of these elements or maybe where there's improvement needed. So segue into our approaches for evaluations. There's 3 methods that we'll review tonight. I know there's an infinite number more. If you have a few that you'd like to share with the audience here, please put that in chat and we'll try to address it if we have time. But if not, it serves as a reference for people to go look up that method to evaluate. The first is probably the classic Toastmasters method, which is the sandwich method, or I've heard it called the hamburger method. That's where you have the positive, you see that on the left in the image, positive, constructive feedback, and you end with positive feedback. We have the see, hear, feel method. And the last one, this is my own, I call it the 4 C's. And the C stand for the construct, content, call to action or conclusion, and the character. We'll dive into each of these. How many of you use the sandwich method mostly? Yeah, I see a lot of hands going up. So why do we start with the positive? Well, it reduces defensiveness. I don't know about you, but I tell friends, and I've had to tell a friend in particular in this call, if you're giving me feedback, Paula, please, oh, did I say her name out loud? Yes, Paula, please put a little sugar on it. It makes the medicine go down. Please put some sugar on your feedback. It reduces the defensiveness. It reduces people's natural inclination to put guardrails up because now you've attacked them or they've taken your feedback as an attack. And it may not be necessarily. It helps to prep and prime the speaker to receive the valuable, constructive, helpful feedback that you're planning to share. So always start with something positive. And I don't mean to broad stroke it and just give platitudes, but point out things that they've done exceptionally well that you can really start with to get them feeling good about the presentation that they just delivered. Then you can share some areas of improvement. Remember, the aim is to be helpful, to be constructive, and to make people feel good about what they've done and inspire them to want to give more speeches to demonstrate more skills at a future time. I know if you're assigned as an evaluator to someone who's been in Toastmasters for 17 years, 20 years, you may think that they are an expert. No, they just have long tenure in Toastmasters. Just because you've been around for a long time doesn't mean that you are a perfect speaker. In fact, there are no perfect speakers ever. Even the most accomplished, the highest paid speakers have to practice, they have to receive feedback, and they have to take corrective action. We don't see that behind the scenes, but it happens. And then finally, as the evaluator using the sandwich method, summarize or conclude with something positive, encouragement, summarize the strengths of the person, give them a good send-off, right? You've improved significantly. I look forward to hearing your next speech or future speeches. Or congratulations, I see your development. You're developing at an exceptional pace. I had noticed the more you speak, the better you get. Wouldn't that feel good to you to be sent off from giving a speech in that manner? Does anyone have any other ways that they typically end their evaluation? Any other examples?
I'll jump in here.
Thanks, Leslie.
I know in our advanced club, we do try to be more specific, especially in terms of whether each of us knows one another's goals, whether it is to conduct a workshop, they're working towards presenting at a major conference. People, I guess, get the idea, or an upcoming training. And we really try to bring that in, and anybody could modify that in terms of a particular goal, that Toastmaster has, that you can build it around something that they're doing as a Toastmaster as a whole.
Yeah, I like that. And that would be so typical of an advanced club to be that specific on the skills and the goals that the person is seeking to develop. Thank you, Leslie. I'll move forward. Let's move to the see, hear, feel method. Does anyone use this method?
I don't use it, but I've seen one member of my local club, she likes to use this one frequently.
Okay, awesome. So jump in, Leslie, if you have something else good to add here. So what I saw, as the evaluator, tell what you saw during the evaluation. That includes eye contact. Did you see the person? And this goes for in-person and virtual. We can tell when people are looking at notes or looking off to the side versus looking at the camera. Looking at the camera takes practice, but it also really helps people think that you're talking directly to them. So it's you as the speaker talking to, we have 16 other participants besides me on this call. So it gives the illusion, but the connection that I'm talking to each of you specifically and directly. So to the extent that you can work on that eye contact, that's helpful. But as the evaluator, if someone is never giving eye contact, maybe they're using dual screens and they're constantly focused on another screen, maybe that is feedback that's worth mentioning. Are gestures being used, again, in multi-settings, virtual and in person? Confidence, preparedness, those are things that you can call out specifically that you saw during the presentation. Use of the speaking area, especially in person, where the speaker has the opportunity to balance their positioning within a speaking area, speaking space, between one side, the center, the other side of the room. They may want to even come into the audience a bit. That gets a little tricky because people, if you get behind people, then they have to turn around and kind of work to listen to you and to see you. So you may not want to do that, but did you stay planted like a tree? Or were you more mutable? Were you more fluid in your movements, in your positioning? Did you engage the audience? Did you hear audience feedback and reaction, whether it's to humor or questions being asked or other aspects of the speech? Tell what you heard. And that goes by way of speech organization. Was it easy or difficult to follow along with the person speaking? Did they have useful transitions? Did they narrate you along the way? Or were they scattered in the presentation? Did they tell a story? And was that congruent with the ultimate purpose and main points of the speech? Word choice. Were they giving you active, and we talked about this last week, active descriptive words so that we can envision ourselves in situations or in experiences? Did they enunciate, use grammatical devices, again, to add zhuzh, as I call it, or flair, flavor, color to the presentation? Did they help paint that mental imagery so that you have a like experience and you can share in some of the emotions and ultimate conclusion of the presentation? Vocal variety, I think this was mentioned earlier. Were they monotone? Did they drone on? Or did they show excitement and give voice to other characters in the stories using persona? These are some of the things that you should listen for as the evaluator. And finally, what you felt. Did the words conjure up emotion, whether it's sadness, joy, anger, excitement? Was the topic interesting? Was it conveyed in an interesting manner? Maybe something that was unconventional. We talked about double entendres for speech titles, or maybe even speech openings. Did you get the sense that the speaker was being genuine? Were they an authority, or did they have good command over the speech topic? Were they prepared? Did they research? Were references used? What was the purpose of the speech? Was it to inform? Was it to entertain? Was it to captivate, demonstrate, evaluate? So those are some of the things that you should think about when using the see, feel, hear, feel method. Leslie, did I hit on most of the points? Do you have anything else to add?
Exactly. And obviously, I think what I have noticed is that an evaluator sometimes is more heavily into one aspect than another, just because that's how they are listening. Like they might be seeing a lot and heard and felt. And obviously, if you only have 2 to 3 minutes to give your evaluation, you really need to tighten up the highlights when you go to actually present the verbal, the oral evaluation. I think that's key when you deliver this, and to do it with examples as you go. Like just give an example of what the grammatical device was, genuine. And I think it gives I think the fellow Toastmasters benefit because they go, oh, I see, or I hear, or I feel what I could say to somebody.
Yeah, thank you. And I will suggest this. Try, if you can resist, not to step on other functionary roles like the grammarian. I do have grammatical devices in here because I do want you all to be aware of those, and maybe you can point those out. But your grammarian should be able to point those elements out as well. So try to resist doing the counts, the grammarian's role, or even word of the day. And I've seen some evaluators try to do all of it. You have enough evaluating the speech and the delivery of the speech, so you don't have to encroach on those areas, those functionary roles. And then finally, the 4 C's method. And give me 1 second. Let's start with the construct. And by construct, it's just that how was the speech constructed? Was it structured with the opening, body, and conclusion? Because it should be. Were there main points that were very prominent? Or was the story told? There's other ways that the construct could go, but these are some of the points that I want you to be more attuned to. How were the transitions? Were they fluid? Were they choppy? Because they may also lend to the evaluation and the ultimate improvement of the speaker's presentation. The next is the content. And this goes to word choice, and I'm not going to explain it because we just talked about it. This is just a different framework to organize the information. Word choice, vocal variety, the structure, the flow, the topic, whether it was well-researched, whether it had references. The character. Now, most articles, most information about giving an evaluation says, don't evaluate the person, evaluate the speech. I think there is some leeway that you can take with evaluating what I call the character. And by character, I mean the manner. If someone was dressed up in an outfit, a costume, or they had something on them that helped further their speech, then I think that's fair game. That becomes a part of the speech. You don't want to be too critical of people themselves for attributes they have no control over. One that I think we have to be especially sensitive to is non-native English speakers, and know that people are in Toastmasters because if English is not their first language, they're using Toastmasters to help become more fluent and fluid in their adoption of the language. But there are some character aspects that I think are appropriate. Again, use of speaking area, eye contact, gestures, and confidence. If someone looks to be very timid or have a lot of anxiety or trepidation, I would never, and I would suggest you never talk about that in your oral evaluation. You may want to include that in the written evaluation, if at all. Please understand and take into consideration where your Toastmaster members are in their Toastmasters journey. If they don't have a lot of tenure with Toastmasters, please don't make it very intimidating for them to want to speak again by pointing out what could be obvious to them. But if someone is uber confident and that just adds to a pleasant experience, then continue to recognize and reward them or acknowledge that, because that will be repeated behavior. If they use humor well, or emotions, or their volume was spot on, please acknowledge that. But on the converse, if their volume was low, you may want to bring that to their attention as well. As an audience member, I don't think we should have to work necessarily for information. It should be given to us where we can focus solely on the topic, the content, and not on straining to hear someone's speech. And finally, the conclusion or call to action, however the speaker chooses to end. Was there a definite ending? Did it summarize the main points? What was the lasting impression that it left with you? Did it challenge you to adopt a new way of thinking? Or were you introduced to a new process? I think it's worth mentioning to the speaker if their conclusion was bereft of some of these actions, some of this information. I'll pause there for comments, questions or additions to the 4Cs method? John?
Rhonda, the one thing that you mentioned in this, when you're talking about this, that you mentioned before, and frankly, for me, I think it was a really big point even from session one that I never really thought about, but the way you worded it then, which I think was just so well stated, was behavior rewarded is behavior repeated.
Mhm.
And ties right into here. You just mentioned it again about, like really pointing that stuff out so that, and it could be with any part of that, that when you point that out and emphasize it and how it made you feel and how effective it was for whatever reason, that the speaker will more than likely take that to heart and then use that again.
Yeah, John, great point. Thank you for mentioning that, because as I mentioned last week, there are some things people just do innately, speak in triads, or sometimes it could be alliteration, and it's unbeknownst to them until it's pointed out. Then they have the language to say, oh, I know what an alliteration is, or now I know what a simile is, or now I know speaking in triads is effective. So that they will now adopt that as more deliberate effort in communicating information as opposed to happenstance. So yes, don't take for granted that everything your speaker does, your assigned speaker, that they are truly aware that they're being decisive in how they're constructing their speech and delivering their speech. Thanks, John. So let's go through the evaluation don'ts and do's pretty quickly. And this did align with my agenda. I think I put the don'ts first purposefully. Don't assess personal characteristics that are unrelated to the speech. So again, the nervousness, don't point that out. And I heard that, I think it was just this week that someone was a little nervous, and I was thinking, why point that out? The person probably already felt that. So why not just use some positive encouragement instead of pointing out what could have been obvious or may have been obvious, and show empathy, because we are also in the position of being evaluated. So treat people the way we want to be treated. How many of you have go ahead, John.
I was going to ask a question on that. And, like I've seen that with newer members. And the question I have, and I'm interested in, your take, anybody else's take on it. While I don't know that you want to necessarily mention it specifically, on the other hand, you might say, geez, you seem like you might be a little nervous. Maybe if you tried A, B, C, or D, it would help you with that. Now, how do you feel about that? Is that worth going there, or is that something you would avoid? Or, because for me, I sort of feel like, well, gee, I'd like to be able to help them to overcome that.
There's a couple of things I can speak to that on, and I welcome anyone else to jump in. Number one, as the evaluator, when possible, meet with the speaker in advance to understand where their areas of concern are. And you'll see this on another slide. And if they say, wow, I get really nervous, please let me know, then that's your end to tell them outside of the oral evaluation. If the person is a new person, new people tend to be nervous. So that's stating the obvious. So I would just kind of leave it out and watch them over time. Maybe talk to their mentor, if they have a mentor, or become an unofficial mentor to them. If the person has been a long time Toastmaster, you have a good relationship, you may be able to just go up to them and say, hey, you seem extra nervous today. Is anything going on? Any way I can help you? So there are ways to address it. You don't have to let them go blindly for a long time, but just be sensitive to the person's, how long they've been a Toastmaster, and where they are in their journey, the type of rapport. Does anyone else have any other comment to address that?
Uh,
Leslie?
When it's been pointed out or I've mentioned it, I've done it in accordance with why I think, for example, the most often one is when the person is just revving like an engine throughout the entire speech. And I know the person well enough that I can say, you seemed a little anxious, which is probably why your speech went so fast. And I usually get a nod of acknowledgement, like if they look like they're just stumbling, and that's usually with somebody that I know fairly well in the club. So that may or may not be, but they often say later, yeah, that was really a problem for me. So I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, another one is preparation. If they just didn't have enough time to prepare and rehearse, we tend to see that also.
Yeah.
Joyce?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
Yep.
okay. Another way of doing it is talking about when they are confident. And maybe point out at the beginning you were rushing, you were speaking you were speaking faster. But as you went along and you seemed to get more confident in your presentation, you slowed down your pace, and that was more effective. So to let them know what they did well, that showed they were becoming more comfortable, as opposed to pointing out being nervous, pointing out what they did that seemed to be more confident.
Yeah.
I like that choice. Yep. Leslie, you had another point to make?
I just wanted to say from the opposite end, as one who really values feedback and not saying other people don't, but um, I often feel like somebody has done a great evaluation, really was listening. If that evaluator picks up on things that I knew during the speech were problem areas for me, even if they weren't really pronounced to somebody else, because other people might say, oh, yeah, after it's been noted. And so I'm looking at from the other end as the person receiving the evaluation. I think it's always kudos to the evaluator if they've really pinpointed things going in that that you didn't that you thought, okay, I think I didn't do this so well or that so well, and I'm glad it just happened. So just wanted to share that backdoor in thing.
Yep. Thank you. Let's move forward. I know we're tight on time, had too much content for today, but this is all good stuff for me, hopefully for you too. Don't reiterate this speech. And I know you've seen this before, where the evaluator will say, you first started off here, then you said this, then you went here, then you did this, and you're giving the whole speech again. That's not the point of the evaluation. It is to evaluate how the speech was delivered and how the speaker can improve, and to point out the things that were done especially well, not to re-give the speech. So resist that urge as much as you can. Don't make the evaluation about yourself. Remember, this is a gift that you are giving to someone else. And you don't want to focus so much on yourself that you are forfeiting the opportunity to help the speaker improve. And we see this sometimes when people focus on what the speaker talked about, the topic, the experience, and they relate it to their own personal experiences. And that's fine to do offline, because that's not part of the evaluation. The evaluation should focus on the delivery. Don't criticize the points of view that you disagree with. So if someone talks about a topic that you just flat out disagree with, I know it may be difficult to maintain your diverging opinion, but as the evaluator, it is not to get into a sparring match with anyone. It's not to counterbalance or counteract or debate with someone. It is to give them feedback on how they delivered information, even if it goes against your beliefs or principles or thoughts. Don't evaluate too harshly. Consider the speaker's experience. I think we've spoken to that already, so we'll just continue to rock it through. And to the extent that you can, please avoid phrases such as "you should," "it would be better," "you failed." Believe me, I've heard some of these. "I didn't like when,"
Oh,
"I wish you had." One of the harshest evaluations I heard was when the evaluator started off with, "You disappointed me." And as much as the speaker and evaluator had a relationship, and that may have been perfectly okay for him to say in person, it was not okay to say it orally during a meeting with new members, with seasoned members, and especially with guests, because it was off-putting. That did not seem welcoming. It did not seem helpful. And had I been the speaker, I would have been reticent to speak at the club again, and maybe would have taken my membership elsewhere. We already put ourselves in a vulnerable position as speakers, and no one should be talked to in that type of manner, not at all. You don't have to vocalize all of the feedback that you want to share with the person. Don't be a Rhonda. Don't be that Rhonda DTM. Don't time me. Don't talk too much. But try to hit the highlights, the aspects of the speech from a positive and a constructive manner that will benefit not only the speaker, but the audience. Anything else, put it in the written evaluation. Speaking of written evaluations, how many of you use written evaluations? Good. I'm glad to see many hands up, because I think because we've gone to Zoom, we've kind of gotten away from written evaluations, and they are absolutely helpful. They provide a reference to your speaker so that for future speeches, he or she can go back and see what they did well so they can keep doing it, and the aspects that should be improved upon or could be improved upon. Evaluation do's. Do become familiar with the path, level, and project before the meeting. Get a copy of the evaluation guide. Speak to the speaker and understand their areas of focus or concern, in particular with this speech. And that should be done before this speech to the extent possible. And I'm saying that because sometimes we all do it. We walk into a Toastmasters meeting and we get a role spontaneously ad hoc. But if you have a minute or two to get this information from the speaker, that will be helpful and make their evaluation more meaningful. Lead with love, respect, and encouragement. Remember our Toastmasters values, and they really come into play here as an evaluator. The feedback ratio, 3-to-1. So for every 3 positive things you say, you get to say 1 constructive. Now, I know we don't use this, but as a newer Toastmaster many years ago, I was told that this was the feedback ratio. The point here is not to be prescriptive with the numbers themselves, but your positive should definitely outweigh the constructive, because you don't want to have the reverse happen. You have so much constructive feedback that the person, the speaker, may be thinking, well, did I do anything well? Yes, we want to lead with the positive. We want to have more positive than constructive, especially for the oral evaluation. And choose what you put into the written evaluation judiciously, because you still don't want that to be off-putting, discouraging, and demoralizing to your speaker. Ensure that your feedback is helpful and actionable. You may have to ask yourself, is this helpful? Would this be helpful to me? Is this actionable? Does this give them specific instances or suggestions in how to improve? It's not enough to tell them to improve your construction of the speech or to improve your opening or conclusion. Give examples that are concrete. They will be more indelible. Personalize the evaluation with I statements, such as, I feel, I believe, right? That personalize it, that shows it's from your point of view. After all, evaluations are very subjective. So what you may feel may be different than what I feel about a speech. So make sure that you put it from your point of view. Evaluate the project objectives. Don't forget about that evaluation form that I just mentioned that comes with every pathway speech. If the person doesn't have it or they haven't tied the speech to a specific project, then it's okay to be general in your evaluation, but you don't want to miss the objectives of the speech. Offer, and I underline offer. That means don't just give the suggestions, offer the suggestions and give examples. I use the word consider a lot because I want them to know it's optional. I tell people, and I said this last week, take feedback like you're making spaghetti, throw it against the wall, see what sticks, see what resonates with you, see what helps you to retain your own personality, your own personhood without trying to speak like someone else because they're giving you that recommendation or suggestion. So consider enumerating points for more clarity that tells them specifically what to do. So if you're giving 3 points, first, second, third, that helps people to follow along the path of your speech. And that may add clarity. Maybe it was murky because you did not show where one point ended and the second began and then the third began. You could also say, I suggest, give the suggestion for greater audience engagement, right? That's the why. That's the example. Any questions or comments? Other feedback for do's and don'ts?
One thing came to mind when I was listening. I've heard some people too often, and I'm not saying that I have never done this, especially early on. When you reach the ending of your evaluation and you're looking at everybody, sometimes the audience looks at you, especially if you're in person or even on Zoom, like, okay, is that it? Or if you don't have a definite conclusion, many a time I've heard people say, okay, that's all I have. And I've heard that. And that I think there must be a better replacement for that statement because it makes it sound like they weren't listening or they can't come up with anything else. And I would find that to be kind of very like disappointing that we're not supposed to use that word, but that's how I would see it.
Yes, and we talked about that on a previous slide by ending positively when we talked about the sandwich method, ending positively saying, I admire your progress. I look forward to your next speech, or give them something to leave with pride and happy and encouraged and inspired, right? It's incumbent upon you as the evaluator. And as we talked about, and we'll talk about next week in particular, when you're delivering the evaluation, it is a speech. There's an opening, a body, and conclusion. And you have to conclude. As much as we expect speakers to conclude, you are a speaker giving an evaluation. That's the purpose of your speech, but you need to have a conclusion as well. And it can't be, that's all I got, that's it, the end. No, you have to end on a high note, as high a note as you began with the positive feedback.
I have a question,
Please.
although we're running out of time, did you want to finish up first?
Nope, you can ask your question.
So again, I'm new. How much do we focus on if they have a specific goal and ignore other things that may be blatant. For example, if their speech is about vocal variety and gestures, but maybe they had a weak conclusion or introduction, should we really just focus on the vocal variety and the gestures and ignore the other thing? Or like,
No,
what do we-
ma'am.
where's our focus as the evaluator? Should it be on their focus or should it be on other things we observe?
I think it should be on the totality of their presentation, right? So you have 2 to 3 minutes to give the oral evaluation, but you have not only the evaluation sheet, you have email, you have other written notes and paper that you can share with the speaker. It's all about them becoming better. And although they may have specific emphasis for the project, you should speak to that, but it would be a disservice if you did not share other aspects for them to improve and be even more engaging and dynamic in their delivery.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah,
John?
Yeah, Rhonda, if I may, I'd like to throw in on that too. I think that for me, like, and typically when I'm evaluating, sometimes I'll use the Toastmasters form, but I've developed my own evaluation form, which really gets into the nitty gritty of all of it, all these different facets. And frankly, there's just no way I could ever give that in 2 to 3 minutes. So, what'll happen is I generally try to encourage a member, especially if it's a newer member, to sit down with me after the meeting and like, hey, if you have a few minutes, let's get into this in greater depth. And I give them a copy of that sheet. And what I've done is the good stuff I've highlighted in green. The stuff that's like, yeah, it could go either way would be in yellow. And then the stuff that's like, don't do that is in pink, so that it gives almost like a traffic light. It gives them an idea of what was good, what wasn't, and so forth. And typically if they can't spend the time after the meeting, I'll say, look, if you'd like, you can call me and I'll be happy to go through this with you to make sure you get the most value out of what I've seen, what I've observed, and what I can share with you. But going back to your point, Dolores, I may focus a little bit more in that evaluation on the stuff that they're working on, whether it was gestures or whatever the case may be. But I try to make sure that that ultimately, whether it's in the 2 to 3 minutes that I'm doing it within the evaluation segment of the meeting, which it probably won't be because there's so much stuff. But on the other hand, I try to make sure that I give them the benefit of the observations I had from watching the speech, which would frankly be pretty much all encompassing.
Thank you for your feedback.
Yep, thank you. Anyone else?
I just wanted to add, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Just really quick, I just started my second pathway and I did my icebreaker, and in the pathways it gives you little checks, and one of the things was after your evaluation to sit down with your speech evaluator and talk through it, and it was really powerful. I don't know that all the projects are like that, but with the updated look and feel, so that it's great that they're getting that right out of the gate on the icebreaker.
Thanks, Michelle. Joyce?
One thing I would suggest, even for new people, is talk to other members of the audience, not just your primary evaluator, to get feedback from more than one person, because people have a different point of view. In advanced clubs, they have group evaluations. But for a new member in a regular club, maybe it's just something informal about touching base with somebody else besides their primary evaluator for comments.
And let's not forget the mentors. I'm going to always revert back to mentors. As the evaluator, feel free to slide it to the mentor also, who may have a stronger relationship with the person, may understand their vulnerabilities, their concern areas a little bit more. And the reality is we're all here to help one another, I think. I hope. We should be. And until people are becoming more confident in their presentation, they may receive that information from their mentor more than from a group of people. I think the group evaluations are very helpful. I just attended Leslie's meeting on Saturday and there was a group evaluation, and that's perfectly okay, especially for an advanced Toastmasters club. What I like about the one-on-one evaluation, you all as evaluators specifically, is that you have the opportunity to perfect, if there is such a thing, or at least practice the art of giving feedback. And I don't know about you, but it was just performance management time at my job, and I had to have those conversations with people that report to me, as well as me and my manager, right? So I performance managed him as well. So it's an opportunity for us all to get that experience and giving that feedback. Does anyone else have any other comment? We are out of time. The one exercise that I thought we had time for was to view a speech and to actually have the evaluation. We will do that next meeting, the next session. This at least gives you some time to think about, ruminate on these 3 approaches. And like John, I also have my own cheat sheets, my own formats that I can almost fill in the blank for. I will give those out to you. What's today? Wednesday, by Friday. Let me just touch it up a bit and I'll share it with you all in case it's of help for you, in case you want to use this to adopt a different way or practice different ways of giving feedback so that you can see what feels natural, what feels good, and what may be most helpful for the speaker that you're evaluating. Any suggestions for this session or session number 3? Anything that you expected to have seen by now that you haven't seen yet?
I don't know what to expect yet,
Okay.
but I would be personally interested. We have seasoned members in our Toastmasters Club. Tim Tilson just won the table topics
Nice.
thing. And we have brand new members who are probably struggling. And I would like to know how to moderate evaluation. Like, do we give stronger feedback to the more seasoned people? Do we give the same type of feedback regardless? Are we easier? I don't want to use the word easier, but do we hold
You are
back
easier.
for newer people? Are we more easy? Yeah. So,
Yes, you are. You are. You moderate it based on the person's experience in Toastmasters and the level that they are on. If they are a brand new Toastmaster, you would have a different evaluation than for someone that's been in 5-10 years. And sometimes what I do, Dolores, is I'll say, I'm going to be a little stronger on Paula because number 1, she can handle it. Number 2, I owe her some licks. Number 3, she's a very experienced Toastmaster. Right. So you can preface it, and I would prefer you do that so that your other members and your guests understand why this member is getting what may be perceived as a harsher evaluation. None of them should be harsh, but you're being more specific and you're looking at more technical aspects of the speech versus a newer member giving it an icebreaker.
you might just be happy they stayed in their time.
I'm glad
Right.
they showed up.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And delivered
And
the
did a
speech.
speech and stayed in
Yes.
the time and, yeah,
And stayed in time. Exactly. All of that. So yes, you do moderate your evaluation based on the person that you're evaluating. And I can't emphasize it enough. Reach out to the person ahead of time to the extent possible. If it's just in time at the meeting, you just got assigned to be their evaluator, just ask, can I look for something in particular? Are you concerned about anything? What skill are you actually working to practice today?
Thank you for your time.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you all very much. We're 5 minutes over. I'll let you all enjoy the rest of your evening. I look forward to seeing many of you next week as we talk about actually delivering the speech evaluation. We've talked about the mechanics, who it benefits, different approaches. Now we need to put this into action, and we'll have some experiential learning. So we'll have a video, or actually we have a live speech that will happen next week, and you'll have opportunities to use whatever method that we went over tonight, or if you want to strike out on your own. But we'd like to hear some of your evaluations as a result of going through this series, evaluation series. So thank you all very much.
And
Yes, John.
is it in 2 weeks?
It's in 2 weeks. I know I said next week, but it's
Okay.
March 5th. Thank you. Thank you so much. Just testing to see if you're listening. Thank you all very much.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
you.
Good night.
Good night.